The command center of the UES Titan hummed with its usual activity. Commander Jake Morrison sat in his chair, reviewing reports from the night shift. It was supposed to be a quiet patrol along the outer rim of human territory. Nothing ever happened out here in the dark spaces between star systems. The crew had grown comfortable with the routine, almost bored with the endless watches and status checks. Lieutenant Amy Burke sat at her communications station, monitoring the standard frequencies. She was young, barely 25, but she had proven herself capable during her 2 years aboard the Titan. Her fingers moved across the console with practiced ease, checking each channel for any unusual activity. Most days brought nothing but static and the occasional automated beacon from distant mining operations. Then everything changed in an instant. A signal burst through the speakers, weak and fragmented. Amy sat up straight, her eyes widening as she quickly adjusted the filters to clean up the transmission. The sound was unlike anything in the human database. It was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, but the language was completely alien. "Commander Morrison, I have an unknown signal on frequency 773, Amy called out, her voice tight with excitement and concern. "It's not human, sir. Definitely not human." Jake stood up from his chair and walked over to her station. He was a tall man in his early 40s with gray starting to show in his dark hair. 20 years in the Earth Defense Fleet had taught him to take every anomaly seriously. He leaned over Amy's shoulder, studying the waveform patterns on her screen. "Can you clean it up?" he asked. "Working on it now, sir," Amy replied, her fingers flying across the controls. She ran the signal through every filter and enhancement protocol the Titan possessed. Slowly, the static began to clear and a voice emerged. It was high-pitched, almost musical, and filled with unmistakable fear. The ship's artificial intelligence immediately began working on translation. Within seconds, words started appearing on the screen. Jake felt his stomach tighten as he read them. The message was a distress call, and it was desperate. "Get Captain Grant on the line," Jake ordered, "and wake up the senior staff. Tell them we have a situation." Within minutes, the command center was filled with officers. Captain Lisa Grant arrived first, still fastening her uniform jacket. She was a stern woman with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded the UES Horizon for 5 years and was the senior captain in this sector. "Report," she said simply. Amy played the cleaned-up transmission. The alien voice spoke rapidly, and the translation appeared on the main screen. The message was simple and terrifying. The speaker identified themselves as a Volari, a member of a peaceful species that had existed in this region of space for thousands of years. Their homeworld was under attack by something called the Krath Collective. Their defenses had fallen. Their people were dying by the millions. They had sent distress calls to every civilization they knew, but no one had answered. They were out of options and out of time. The command center fell silent as the message ended. Jake looked around at the faces of his crew. They all understood what they had just heard. Somewhere out in the darkness, an entire civilization was being destroyed. "Where is the signal coming from?" Captain Grant asked. Lieutenant Ryan Cole, the tactical officer, pulled up a star chart on the main display. He was a compact man with quick hands and a sharp mind for numbers. He pointed to a sector far beyond the mapped regions of human space. "Approximately 3 weeks away at maximum jump speed," Ryan said. "The Valor system. We have minimal data on it. A few long-range scans from explorer ships, but nothing detailed." "What do we know about these Krath?" Jake asked. "Nothing, sir," Ryan admitted. "The name doesn't appear in any of our databases, but based on the Volari transmission, they sound like a hostile military force." Captain Grant stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Jake knew she was running through scenarios in her mind, calculating risks and outcomes. Every officer in the fleet learned to think this way. You assessed the situation, considered your options, and made the best decision you could with the information available. "Amy, can you establish two-way communication with them?" Grant asked. "I can try, ma'am," Amy said. She worked on her console for several minutes, then shook her head. "The signal is too weak. They're either too far away or their transmitters are damaged. I can send a message, but I can't guarantee they'll receive it." "Send it anyway," Grant ordered. "Tell them we received their distress call. Tell them humanity is aware of their situation." Amy nodded and began composing the message. Jake watched her work, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the implications of what they had just heard. The Volari had sent their call to everyone, but only humans had responded. What did that say about the other civilizations in this part of the galaxy? Were they afraid? Did they not care? Or was there something about the craft that made everyone else unwilling to get involved? I need to contact Earth Command, Captain Grant said. She turned to Jake. Commander Morrison, you have the bridge. Keep monitoring that signal. If anything changes, I want to know immediately. Yes, ma'am, Jake replied. Grant left the command center, heading for the secure communications room. Jake knew what she was going to do. She was going to send a priority message directly to Admiral Patricia Stone, the commander of the entire Earth Defense Fleet. A decision like this, whether to intervene in an alien conflict far from human space, could only be made at the highest levels. Jake returned to his command chair and stared at the star chart on the main display. The Valar system was represented by a small blue dot in a vast sea of darkness. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks while an entire civilization died. Sir, I'm picking up another transmission, Amy said suddenly. It's another Valari signal, but from a different source. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies now. Jake listened as the translation appeared on the screen. This message was even more desperate than the first. The Krath had broken through the last orbital defenses. They were beginning bombardment of the major cities. The Valari government was evacuating underground, but there was nowhere left to run. They estimated they had days, maybe hours, before their species was extinct. The weight of those words settled over the command center like a physical thing. Days or hours. Not enough time for help to arrive, even if help was coming. Commander, we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Stone, the communications officer announced. Jake felt his pulse quicken. That was impossibly fast. Grant must have used emergency protocols to reach Earth Command. He activated the secure channel on his personal console. Admiral Stone's face appeared on the screen. She was a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and a reputation for making tough decisions. She had commanded fleets in 3 different conflicts and never lost a ship under her direct command. Commander Morrison, I've reviewed Captain Grant's report, Stone said without preamble. I'm issuing immediate orders for the mobilization of the first Dreadnought Armada. You will proceed to the Valar system at maximum speed and render assistance to the Valari people. Rules of engagement are at your discretion, but I want it clear that Earth will not stand by while genocide occurs. Jake felt a surge of pride mixed with apprehension. The first Dreadnought Armada was the most powerful military force humanity had ever assembled. 12 of Earth's newest and most advanced warships, each one capable of devastating firepower, but they would be going into unknown territory against an unknown enemy to fight for people they had never met. Understood, Admiral, Jake said. We won't let you down. I know you won't, Stone replied. Stone out. The transmission ended and Jake stood up. He looked around at his crew, seeing the mixture of excitement and fear on their faces. They all knew what was coming. They were going to war. The mobilization began within hours of Admiral Stone's orders. Across the solar system, crews received urgent recall notices. Men and women on leave returned to their ships. Supply vessels raced between stations and dreadnoughts, loading ammunition, food, medical supplies, and everything else needed for extended combat operations. The docks around Mars Orbital Station buzzed with activity that hadn't been seen since the colony wars a decade earlier. Jake Morrison stood in the hangar bay of the Titan, watching as the last of the supply containers were loaded into the cargo holds. Commander Helen Price stood beside him, reviewing a tablet filled with readiness reports. Helen was his executive officer, a woman in her mid-30s with red hair and a sharp tactical mind. She had served with Jake for 3 years, and he trusted her judgment completely. Engineering reports all systems are at 100%, Helen said, scrolling through the data. Weapons are loaded and tested. Life support is operating normally. Medical bay is fully stocked. We're ready to go, sir. Good, Jake replied. What's the status of the rest of the Armada? The Horizon, Valiant, Thunder, and 8 others are all reporting ready, Helen said. Admiral Stone has designated you as fleet commander for this operation. Captain Grant will serve as your second in command. Jake felt the weight of that responsibility settle onto his shoulders. 12 ships, thousands of crew members, all depending on his decisions in the coming battle. He had commanded ships before, even small task forces, but never anything on this scale. Have all ship captains report to the Titan for a briefing at 1800 hours, Jake ordered. I want everyone on the same page before we jump. Yes, sir, Helen said. She made a note on her tablet and walked off to pass along the orders. Jake continued his inspection of the hangar bay. Mechanics worked on the small fighter craft that the Titan carried for close-range defense. Engineers tested the launch systems that would send them into space when needed. Everyone moved with purpose and efficiency. The crew of the Titan was one of the best in the fleet, and it showed in moments like this. Lieutenant Amy Burke found him an hour later. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. Jake knew she had been working non-stop since receiving the Valari distress call, trying to maintain some form of communication with the dying civilization. Commander, I managed to send 3 more messages to the Valari, Amy reported. I can't confirm they received them, but I included our estimated time of arrival and instructions to hold out as long as possible. Good work, Amy, Jake said. Have you slept at all? I'll sleep when we've saved them, sir, Amy replied with a tired smile. That's an admirable attitude, but I need you sharp when we arrive, Jake said firmly. Get 4 hours of rest. That's an order. Amy looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded. Yes, sir. As she left, Engineer Paul Sanders approached. Paul was a big man, built like someone who worked with heavy machinery all his life. He had been with the Titan since its launch 5 years ago and knew every system on the ship better than anyone else. Commander, I wanted to update you on the weapons modifications, Paul said. I've reprogrammed the railgun firing sequence. We can increase our effective range by about 15%, maybe more if we push it. Will it compromise the weapon's integrity? Jake asked. Not if we manage the heat properly, Paul assured him. I've run simulations 100 times, it works. Then implement it across all railgun batteries, Jake decided, and send the specs to the other ships in the Armada. Every advantage we can get will matter. Already done, sir, Paul said with a grin. Figured you'd approve it. At 1800 hours, the captains of all 12 dreadnoughts assembled in the Titan's main briefing room. Jake stood at the head of the table, with a holographic display of the Velar system floating above the surface. Captain Lisa Grant sat to his right, and the other captains filled in the remaining seats. Jake activated the display, and everyone's attention focused on it. The hologram showed a yellow star with 6 planets. The third planet, Velar Prime, glowed, with a red indicator showing it as the target location. This is what we know, Jake began. The Valari are a peaceful species with a population of approximately 6 billion. They have minimal military capability, focusing their society on science and diplomacy. 3 days ago, they were attacked by the Krath Collective, a hostile empire we know nothing about. He zoomed in on Velar Prime, showing orbital trajectories around the planet. Intelligence estimates put the Krath fleet at over 200 vessels, ranging from small frigates to massive battlecruisers. They have established orbital superiority and are conducting planetary bombardment. One of the captains, a grizzled veteran named Frank Gibson, spoke up. 200 ships against our 12. Those aren't good odds, Commander. No, they're not, Jake agreed. Which is why we're not going to fight them head-on. Our advantage is technology and surprise. The Krath have never encountered humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. He manipulated the display, showing 3 approach vectors toward the planet. We'll split into 3 groups and attack from different angles. The goal is to create confusion and prevent them from concentrating their fire. Group 1, led by the Titan, will target their command ship. Group 2, led by the Horizon, will engage their carrier groups. Group 3 will focus on eliminating their orbital bombardment platforms. Captain Grant studied the plan carefully. It's aggressive. We'll be deep in their formation with no easy escape route. The Valari don't have time for a cautious approach, Jake said. Every hour we delay, more of them die. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we don't stop until either they're defeated or we are. The room fell silent as the captains considered his words. Jake could see doubt on some faces, determination on others. These were experienced officers. All of them had seen combat before. They knew the risks. I won't lie to you, Jake continued. Some of us might not come back from this, but I believe in what we're doing. The Valari sent out a call for help, and every other civilization ignored them. If we do the same, What does that say about humanity? What does that say about who we are? Captain Grant stood up. Commander Morrison is right. We have the power to make a difference, and with that power comes responsibility. I'm with him. One by one, the other captains stood and voiced their agreement. Even Frank Gibson, despite his concerns, nodded his support. They were committed now, all of them, to this desperate mission. The briefing continued for another 2 hours as they refined the battle plan and discussed contingencies. Jake assigned specific targets to each ship and established communication protocols for coordinating their attacks. By the time they finished, everyone knew their role and what was expected of them. As the captains returned to their ships, Helen Price approached Jake. "That was a good speech, sir. You gave them something to believe in." "I meant every word," Jake said. "We're not just fighting for the Volari. We're defining what humanity stands for in this galaxy." "Then let's make sure we win," Helen said. The next morning, the first Dreadnought Armada departed from Mars Orbital Station. The 12 massive warships accelerated away from the planet, their drives leaving trails of blue light across the darkness of space. On the Titan's bridge, Jake sat in his command chair and watched the stars slip past on the main view screen. Lieutenant Ryan Cole worked at his tactical station, running continuous simulations of the upcoming battle. Amy Burke monitored communications, maintaining contact with the other ships in the Armada. Dr. Karen White, the chief medical officer, had prepared the medical bay for mass casualties. Everyone was doing their part. 3 weeks. That's how long it would take to reach the Valar system. 3 weeks of preparation, training, and worry. 3 weeks while an entire civilization fought for survival, hoping that help would arrive in time. Jake opened a ship-wide channel. His voice carried to every compartment, every crew member aboard the Titan. "This is Commander Morrison," he began. "By now, all of you know where we're going and why. The Volari are dying, and we're their only hope. I know the odds seem impossible. I know many of you are afraid. That's normal. That's human. But I also know that everyone on this ship is a professional. You've trained for situations like this. You know your jobs. When we arrive at Valar Prime, I'm going to need everyone at their best. We're going to show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. Morrison out." He closed the channel and leaned back in his chair. Helen stepped close and spoke quietly. "Do you think we can actually win this?" Jake was silent for a moment, considering the question. Finally, he said, "I think we have to. Because if we don't, who will?" The journey to the Valar system took exactly 21 days. For Jake Morrison, each day felt longer than the last. He spent his time reviewing tactical data, running combat simulations, and meeting with his senior staff. Sleep came in short bursts, interrupted by dreams of arriving too late, of finding nothing but a dead world and floating wreckage. Amy Burke managed to establish sporadic contact with the Volari during the journey. Each transmission brought worse news than the last. The Krath bombardment had destroyed 3 of the planet's 5 major cities. Casualties were estimated at over 2 billion and climbing. The Volari government had moved underground, coordinating desperate resistance efforts that did little against the overwhelming enemy force. On the 18th day, Amy received a transmission that she immediately brought to Jake's attention. He read it in his quarters alone and felt his chest tighten. The Volari were thanking humanity for trying to help, even though they believed no one would arrive in time. They wanted humans to know that their gesture, their willingness to attempt a rescue, meant everything. It gave them hope in their darkest hour. Jake sat at his desk for a long time after reading that message. The responsibility of command had never felt heavier. Thousands of Volari were dying every hour, and he was racing through space trying to reach them. Would it be enough? Would they arrive only to find ruins and graves? He pushed those thoughts aside and focused on what he could control. The battle plan, the readiness of his ships, the training of his crew. Everything had to be perfect because they would only get one chance at this. On the morning of day 21, Lieutenant Ryan Cole called him to the bridge. "Commander, we're approaching the jump point for the Valar system. We'll be in range in 2 hours." Jake's pulse quickened. "Sound general quarters. All hands to battle stations. Contact the other ships in the Armada. I want everyone ready the moment we exit jump space." The Titan transformed from a ship on a long voyage into a warship preparing for combat. Crew members raced to their stations. Weapons systems came online, their targeting computers running self-checks. Shield generators began their warm-up sequences. In the hangar bay, pilots climbed into their fighters, ready to launch at a moment's notice. Jake stood on the bridge, watching as his crew moved with practiced efficiency. Helen Price coordinated the departments, ensuring everyone was ready. Amy Burke maintained constant communication with the other 11 ships. Paul Sanders monitored the engineering systems, ready to push the Titan to its limits when the fighting started. "All ships report ready, sir," Amy announced. "They're awaiting your signal." Jake took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would define not just this mission, but humanity's place in the galaxy. He opened a channel to the entire Armada. "This is Commander Morrison to all ships. In a few minutes, we're going to jump into the Valor system. What we find there will likely be brutal. The Krath have been slaughtering innocent people for 3 weeks. They think no one will challenge them. They're wrong. Today, humanity makes a statement. Today, we show the galaxy that Earth stands against tyranny. All ships, prepare to jump on my mark." He looked at Ryan. "Execute jump." The Titan and its 11 sister ships vanished from normal space in flashes of light. For a moment that felt both instant and eternal, they traveled through the strange realm between stars. Then reality snapped back and they emerged in the Valar system. The sight that greeted them was worse than anything Jake had imagined. Valar Prime hung in space before them, a beautiful blue and green world now covered in smoke and fire. Massive plumes rose from the surface where Krath weapons had struck. The planet's orbital space was filled with wreckage from destroyed Valari defense platforms and ships, and surrounding it all, like predators circling wounded prey, was the Krath fleet. 217 enemy vessels, according to Ryan's immediate count. They ranged from small frigates to enormous battlecruisers, all bearing the same dark red and black color scheme. The largest ship, positioned in geosynchronous orbit directly over one of the burning cities, was truly massive. It had to be over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons. "That's their flagship," Ryan said, highlighting it on the tactical display. "Energy readings are off the scale. That thing is a planet killer." "Target designated," Jake said calmly, though his heart was racing. "All ships execute attack pattern Alpha 7. Group 1, follow the Titan. We're going for the flagship." The 12 human dreadnoughts split into their assigned groups and began their approach. The Krath fleet was so focused on the planet below that they didn't immediately notice the new arrivals. That was their first mistake. Jake counted down in his head. 10 seconds until they were in range. 9, 8. The Krath sensors would detect them soon. 7, 6. He could see enemy ships beginning to turn. Confused by the unexpected contacts. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All weapons fire, Jake commanded. The first Dreadnought Armada opened fire simultaneously. 18 railgun slugs, each one a solid piece of metal accelerated to devastating speed, streaked across space. The Krath ships had no time to raise shields, no time to evade. The impacts were catastrophic. 3 Krath cruisers simply ceased to exist, torn apart by kinetic energy. 2 more were crippled, spinning out of control with massive holes punched through their hulls. The precision of the human targeting was perfect. Every shot had hit exactly where Ryan and his fellow tactical officers had aimed. The Krath fleet erupted into chaos. Alarm signals filled their communications channels, which Amy was monitoring and jamming where possible. Ships that had been leisurely orbiting the planet suddenly scrambled into defensive positions, but they were disorganized, confused, unsure what was happening or where this new threat had come from. "Second volley fire," Jake ordered. More railgun slugs launched and more Krath ships died or were disabled. The human dreadnoughts continued their advance, moving at high speed toward their targets. The Titan led Group 1 directly toward the massive flagship, with the Valiant and Thunder flanking it on either side. Finally, the Krath commander managed to organize a response. Warlord Thex, as he would later be identified, was a veteran of a dozen conquered worlds. He had never encountered an enemy that could hurt his fleet so badly so quickly, but he was not a fool, and he was not going to let this challenge go unanswered. "All ships, enemy contact bearing 273. Engage and destroy." Thex's orders, translated by the Titan's computers, crackled across the monitored frequencies. The Krath fleet began to turn away from Valar Prime and toward the human armada. Over 200 warships, their weapons charging, their shields coming online. The numerical advantage was overwhelming. By every conventional military doctrine, the humans should have retreated or tried to escape. Instead, Jake Morrison pressed forward. Maintain course and speed. All weapons, continuous fire. Show them what Earth is capable of. The Titan's railguns fired again and again, each shot timed perfectly to maximize damage. Plasma torpedoes launched from the ship's forward tubes, streaking through space like tiny suns. The other ships in Group 1 did the same, concentrating their fire on the Krath flagship and the vessels protecting it. The first Krath return fire reached them moments later. Plasma bolts and missile salvos crossed the distance between the two fleets. The Titan's shields flared brilliant blue as they absorbed the impacts. The ship shuddered and damage reports started coming in from various sections. Shields at 82%, Paul reported from engineering. Rerouting power to compensate. Keep us in the fight, Paul, Jake said. Helen, evasive maneuvers. Don't let them get a clean shot. The Titan began to weave and dodge, using its superior maneuverability to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. The human dreadnoughts were smaller and faster than the Krath vessels, built for speed and striking power rather than just brute force. Captain Lisa Grant's voice came over the command channel. Morrison, the Horizon is engaging the carrier groups. They're launching fighters. Lots of fighters. Copy that, Jake replied. All ships, deploy your fighter screens. Don't let those small craft get close. The battle was fully engaged now. The Titan's hangar bays opened and 24 human fighters launched into space. They were met by hundreds of Krath fighters, small angular craft that swarmed like insects. The space between the two fleets became a chaotic mess of ships, weapons fire, explosions, and debris. Through it all, Jake kept his focus on the primary target. The Krath flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, was finally turning to face them. Its weapons came online, and Jake saw energy readings that made even the experienced tactical officers blanch. That thing is charging some kind of main gun, Ryan reported. If it fires that at us, I don't think our shields will hold. Then we don't let it fire, Jake said. He opened a channel to the Valiant and Thunder. Focus all firepower on that flagship's forward weapon ports. We need to disable that gun before it can shoot. The three human dreadnoughts concentrated their fire on a single target. Dozens of railgun slugs and plasma torpedoes slammed into the forward section of the enemy flagship. Armor plating cracked and peeled away. Secondary explosions rippled across the hull, but the massive ship kept coming and its main gun continued to charge. 30 seconds to firing range, Ryan warned. Jake made a split-second decision. 5 seconds before the Destroyer of Worlds could fire its massive main weapon, the Titan struck first. Every railgun on the ship fired simultaneously, targeting the exact same point on the enemy flagship's forward section. The concentrated kinetic impact was beyond anything the Krath engineers had planned for. The armor plating buckled inward, and the main gun exploded before it could discharge its energy. The explosion tore through the forward third of the Krath flagship, sending a shockwave that rippled across its hull. But the massive vessel didn't die. It was too large, too heavily built. Instead, it began emergency maneuvers trying to bring its secondary weapons to bear on the Titan. We hurt them, but they're still in this fight, Ryan reported, his fingers dancing across his tactical console. Multiple secondary batteries coming online. They're mad now. Good, Jake said. Angry enemies make mistakes. Maintain our attack. Don't give them time to recover. The Valiant and Thunder moved into position on either side of the Titan, forming a spearhead formation that drove deeper into the Krath fleet. Behind them, the rest of Group 1 followed, their weapons firing continuously. The human ships moved like hunters, fast and coordinated, while the Krath vessels lumbered like wounded bears, powerful but slow to adapt. On the other side of the battlefield, Captain Lisa Grant was having her own problems. The Horizon had engaged 3 Krath carrier groups, and the enemy fighters were proving to be more numerous than intelligence had predicted. Hundreds of small craft swarmed around her ship, their weapons pecking away at the shields like angry insects. Launch all fighters, Grant ordered, and someone get me a firing solution on those carriers. Cut off the source of these fighters. The Horizon's weapons officer, a young woman named Kate Murphy, worked frantically at her station. Carriers are staying behind their escort screen, Captain. I can't get a clean shot. Then make a dirty shot, Grant snapped. Fire through the escorts if you have to. I want those carriers burning. Kate targeted the nearest carrier and launched a spread of 6 plasma torpedoes. They streaked through space and 2 were intercepted by Krath Point defense systems. But 4 made it through, slamming into the carrier's hull. The enemy ship shuddered but stayed intact. These vessels were built tough. It's going to take more than that, Kate muttered. Then keep firing, Grant said. And someone tell our fighters to clear a path. The human fighter pilots were outnumbered 5 to 1, but they had better training and better equipment. Their ships were faster and more maneuverable than the Krath craft. They formed into tight squadrons and began cutting through the enemy fighter swarms with brutal efficiency. Back on the Titan, Jake received an update from Group 3. They had successfully eliminated 4 Krath orbital bombardment platforms, relieving some of the pressure on Velar Prime's surface. But the victory came at a cost. One of the human dreadnoughts, the Defender, had taken heavy damage and was withdrawing from the battle. Sir, we're getting casualty reports, Dr. Karen White's voice came through from the medical bay. 15 wounded so far, 3 critical. And that's just on the Titan. The other ships are reporting similar numbers. Jake felt each casualty like a physical blow, but he couldn't let it affect his decisions. Do what you can for them, Karen. We're not done fighting yet. The Titan shook as another volley of Krath weapons struck their shields. Paul's voice came through from engineering, strained but steady. Shields at 43%. I'm routing emergency power, but we can't take much more of this. Understood, Jake replied. He studied the tactical display, looking for an advantage, any weakness in the enemy formation. The Krath fleet was starting to coordinate their attacks now, concentrating fire on individual human ships. They were learning, adapting to human tactics. Then Amy made a discovery that changed everything. Commander, I've been analyzing their communication patterns. All the Krath ships are receiving orders from a central source. It's a coordination network, probably run from their flagship. If we could disrupt that network, their fleet would lose tactical cohesion. Jake leaned forward in his chair. Can you jam it? I can try, but it's heavily encrypted and protected. I'd need to get closer to the flagship within a few thousand kilometers to have any chance of breaking through their security. A few thousand kilometers puts us in point-blank range of every weapon on that ship, Helen said, concern clear in her voice. Then we better make sure we take them out before they take us out, Jake said. He opened the command channel to all ships in Group 1. All vessels form up on the Titan. We're going to make a final push on the flagship. Concentrate all fire on their command and control systems. Amy will identify the targets. The human ships tightened their formation and accelerated toward the destroyer of worlds. The Krath flagship, still reeling from the damage to its main weapon, tried to maneuver away. But it was too large, too slow. The human dreadnoughts closed in like wolves surrounding a wounded elk. Warlord Thex watched the approaching human ships from his command throne. He had underestimated these creatures, and that mistake was costing him dearly. His fleet should have crushed them through sheer numbers, but these humans fought with a ferocity and coordination he had never encountered. Their weapons were more advanced than anything the Krath possessed, and their tactics were brilliant. All vessels concentrate fire on the lead human ship, Thex ordered. I want it destroyed now. Over 40 Krath vessels turned their weapons on the Titan. The volume of fire was incredible, more than any ship should have been able to survive. The Titan's shields blazed like a small star as they absorbed impact after impact. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems began to fail under the strain. Shields at 12%, Paul reported, his voice tight. We're losing them, Commander. Another hit like that and we're going to start taking direct hull damage. Jake's hands gripped the arms of his command chair. This was the moment. Either they succeeded in the next few minutes or they failed and died trying. There was no middle ground, no partial victory. Amy, target their communication node. Everyone else, fire everything we have at that location. Amy's fingers flew across her console, identifying the exact location of the Krath coordination system. It was deep inside the flagship, protected by layers of armor and shielding. Hitting it would require precision that bordered on impossible. Target locked, Amy said, transmitting coordinates to all ships. The Titan, Valiant, and Thunder fired simultaneously. Railgun slugs, plasma torpedoes, and missile salvos converged on a single point on the destroyer of worlds. The combined firepower of 3 human dreadnoughts, all focused on an area less than 50 meters across, was devastating. The Krath flagship's armor cracked, then shattered. The weapons penetrated deep into the ship's interior, and a series of explosions erupted from within. The coordination node, the brain of the entire Krath fleet, was destroyed in an instant. Across the battlefield, Krath ships suddenly went silent. The constant stream of tactical orders from their flagships ceased. Individual captains, trained to follow commands rather than think independently, hesitated. Some continued their attacks, others held position, waiting for instructions that would never come. The fleet's cohesion collapsed. It worked, Amy shouted, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Their command network is down. They're in complete disarray. Jake didn't waste the opportunity. All ships press the attack. Target their command vessels. Keep them off balance. The battle shifted in that moment. The human dreadnoughts, despite being outnumbered and damaged, became the hunters instead of the hunted. They moved through the Krath fleet, striking at command ships and carriers, eliminating any vessel that tried to reorganize the enemy forces. Captain Grant led the Horizon in a daring attack run that destroyed 2 of the 3 carrier groups her ship had been fighting. The third carrier, its escorts destroyed and its fighters running out of fuel, attempted to flee. Grant let it go, focusing instead on the next target. The fighting continued for another hour, brutal and intense. The Titan's shields finally failed completely, and the ship began taking direct hits to its armored hull. Compartments were breached, systems failed, and more crew members were wounded or killed. But still they fought on, and still they pressed forward. Warlord Thex, seeing his fleet falling apart around him and his flagship crippled, made a final, desperate gamble. He ordered all remaining ships to make a suicide run on Valar Prime. If he couldn't defeat the humans, he would at least complete the destruction of the Valari before he died. But Jake Morrison had anticipated this. Group 3, having finished with the orbital platforms, had positioned themselves between the planet and the main Krath fleet. When enemy ships tried to break through to continue the bombardment, they ran into a wall of human firepower. The Krath ships died by the dozens, their hulls torn apart before they could reach the planet. Those that made it through the human defensive line found that the Valari, given hope by humanity's arrival, had managed to bring a few of their remaining defense platforms back online. The combined human and Valari fire was enough to stop the suicide attack completely. Thex watched his dreams of conquest burn in the void of space. His fleet was shattered. His flagship was dying, and the humans just kept coming, relentless and unstoppable. For the first time, the silence that fell over the battlefield was almost deafening. For 3 weeks, the Valar system had echoed with weapons fire and explosions. Now, as the last Krath ships fled into the darkness, only the sound of damage control teams and emergency broadcasts filled the void. Jake Morrison sat in his command chair on the Titan, hardly believing what they had accomplished. His ship was battered, with hull breaches on 6 decks and systems failing throughout. But they were alive, and they had won. Against impossible odds, the first Dreadnought Armada had defeated a force nearly 20 times their size. "Damage report," Jake said, his voice hoarse from hours of giving orders. Helen Price consulted her tablet, her face pale. "Shields are completely offline. Hull armor is breached in multiple locations. We've lost the number 3 railgun battery entirely. Life support is operating at 60% capacity. Engineering reports we need at least 2 weeks in dock for repairs." "Casualties?" Jake asked, dreading the answer. 43 wounded, 12 killed, Helen said quietly. "Medical bay is overwhelmed. Dr. White is requesting assistance from the other ships." Jake felt each death like a knife to his heart. 12 people had died under his command. 12 families would receive terrible news. But he also knew that without their sacrifice, billions of Valari would have perished. It was the terrible mathematics of war, trading lives to save lives. "Send medical teams from the less damaged ships to assist," Jake ordered. "And get me a status report on the rest of the Armada." The reports came in over the next hour. Every ship had sustained damage. The Defender was the worst off, barely holding together after taking direct hits from a Krath battlecruiser. 2 other dreadnoughts had lost main propulsion and were drifting. But miraculously, not a single human ship had been destroyed. They had all survived, though some just barely. The total human casualties across the entire Armada were 107 wounded and 23 killed. Against a fleet of over 200 enemy vessels, it was a remarkably low number. The superior human technology and tactics had made the difference. Commander, I'm receiving a transmission from the Valari government, Amy reported. Her voice was thick with emotion. They're asking permission to come aboard. Permission granted, Jake said. Have them meet me in the main hangar bay. An hour later, Jake stood in the hangar bay with Captain Grant and several other officers. A small Valari shuttle approached, its hull scarred from the weeks of bombardment. It landed gently and the airlock opened. The Valari who emerged were unlike anything Jake had expected. They were tall and slender, with iridescent skin that shifted colors in the light. Their faces were almost human-like, but with larger eyes and delicate features. They moved with a grace that seemed almost musical. The leader of the group, an elderly Valari with silver-tinted skin, approached Jake with slow, reverent steps. When he spoke, his voice was translated by the universal communication device he wore. I am Elder Soren of the Valari Council, he said. On behalf of my people, I offer you our deepest gratitude. You came when no one else would. You risked everything to save a species you had never met. We are forever in your debt. Jake felt uncomfortable with such praise. We did what anyone should do when they hear a call for help. Soren's eyes, large and expressive, seemed to shine with unshed tears. But no one else did. We sent distress calls to 17 different civilizations. All of them ignored us or said they could not interfere. Only humanity answered. Only humans were willing to fight for us. The truth of those words hung in the air. Jake realized that this battle had been about more than just saving one species. It had been a statement to the entire galaxy about what humanity valued and what they were willing to fight for. How many of your people survived? Captain Grant asked. Soren's expression became pained. We estimate that 4 billion are still alive. 2 billion died in the bombardment before you arrived. It will take generations to rebuild what was destroyed, but we will survive thanks to you. 4 billion. Jake repeated the number in his mind. 4 billion living beings that would continue to exist because of the choice he and Admiral Stone had made. The weight of that number was almost overwhelming. We have medical supplies and aid ships on the way, Jake told Soren. Earth is sending everything we can spare to help with the recovery. You won't face this alone. Your generosity knows no bounds, Soren said. But there is something else we must discuss. The Krath will return. They do not accept defeat. When they regroup, they will come back with an even larger force. Jake had already considered this. Then we'll be ready for them. Earth will establish a defensive presence in this system until your people can rebuild your own defenses, and we'll make sure every other species in the galaxy knows what happened here. The Krath need to understand that their days of conquest are over. Over the next few days, the human armada secured the Valar system. Engineers worked around the clock to repair damaged ships and salvage what they could from Krath wrecks. Medical teams went down to the planet's surface to assist with the injured. Supply ships arrived from Earth carrying food, medicine, and building materials. Jake toured the devastated cities of Valar Prime and saw firsthand the destruction the Krath had caused. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to rubble. Bodies were still being pulled from collapsed buildings. The survivors looked at him and the other humans with something approaching worship, seeing them as saviors sent from the stars. It was humbling and disturbing in equal measure. Jake didn't want to be worshipped. He had simply done what he felt was right, but he understood that to the Valari, humanity's intervention was nothing short of miraculous. On the 5th day after the battle, Jake received a priority transmission from Earth. Admiral Stone's face appeared on the screen, and she was smiling, something Jake had rarely seen. Commander Morrison, I've just finished briefing the United Earth Council on your mission, Stone said. They want me to tell you that you and your entire fleet are being awarded the Star of Valor, Earth's highest military honor. What you accomplished out there, it's already becoming legendary. We just did our jobs, Admiral, Jake replied. You did far more than that, Stone said firmly. Word of the battle has spread across the galaxy. We're receiving communications from dozens of species, some offering alliance, others requesting protection from the Krath. Humanity's reputation has changed overnight. We're no longer seen as newcomers or primitives. We're respected and in some cases feared. Jake thought about that. Humanity had sought to help one species, but in doing so, they had altered the entire political landscape of their region of space. The implications would be felt for generations. There's one more thing, Stone continued. The Valari have offered Earth a formal alliance. They want to share their scientific knowledge with us. including technology that could advance our civilization by decades. The Council is seriously considering accepting. They're good people, Admiral, Jake said. They deserve our friendship. I agree, Stone said. You've done well, Commander. Take care of your people and bring them home when the relief fleet arrives. You've earned a rest. The transmission ended and Jake leaned back in his chair. A rest sounded wonderful. He was exhausted to his core, physically and emotionally drained, but there was still work to do. Lieutenant Amy Burke found him later that evening. She looked different than she had 3 weeks ago. The young, enthusiastic communications officer had been replaced by someone harder, someone who had seen what war really meant, Commander. I've been thinking about the Valari's original distress call, Amy said. They sent it to 17 civilizations and 16 of them did nothing. Why were we the only ones who responded? Jake had been wondering the same thing. Fear, probably. The Krath have a reputation for being brutal. Most species didn't want to risk making an enemy of them. But we did, Amy said. Why? It was a good question. Jake thought about it for a moment before answering. Because we're human. We don't always make the smart choice or the safe choice. Sometimes we make the right choice even when it's dangerous. That's who we are, Amy nodded slowly. I hope the galaxy is ready for that. Jake smiled grimly. They better be. Because now they know what humanity is capable of. 2 weeks later, the relief fleet arrived from Earth. Fresh crews, supplies, and replacement ships to maintain the defensive presence in the Velar system. The first Dreadnought Armada, battered but victorious, prepared to return home. On the day of departure, thousands of Valari gathered at the spaceport to watch the human ships leave. They held up lights and sang songs of gratitude in their musical language. It was a sight that would stay with Jake for the rest of his life. As the Titan pulled away from Velar Prime, Jake stood on the observation deck and watched the planet grow smaller. Elder Soren's words echoed in his mind. Only humanity answered. Only humans were willing to fight for us. It was a heavy responsibility, being the species that said yes when others said no. But looking at the crew around him, at the brave men and women who had risked everything to save strangers, Jake felt proud. Proud of humanity, proud of his ship, proud of what they had accomplished together. The Titan turned toward home, followed by the rest of the Armada. They carried with them the gratitude of an entire civilization and the knowledge that humanity had passed. The journey back to Earth took longer than the trip to Velar Prime. The damaged ships could only travel at reduced speed, and several times they had to stop for emergency repairs. But the mood aboard the Titan was different now. The crew moved with the confidence of people who had been tested and not found wanting. They had fought impossible odds and won. Jake Morrison spent much of the return trip in his quarters, writing reports and letters. The hardest were the personal messages to the families of those who had died. What could he say to a mother who had lost her son, or a husband who had lost his wife? He wrote each letter carefully, trying to honor the sacrifice while offering what comfort he could. It was never enough. Lieutenant Amy Burke knocked on his door one evening. She carried a tablet and a tired expression. Commander, we're receiving transmissions from all over the galaxy. News about the battle has spread faster than I thought possible. What kind of transmissions? Jake asked, gesturing for her to sit. All kinds, Amy said, scrolling through the list. Other species congratulating us. Some requesting military assistance against their own enemies. A few warning us to stay out of their territory. There's even one from a species called the Harn, offering to buy our weapons technology. Jake shook his head. Forward everything to Earth Command. They'll figure out how to respond to all this political mess. There's one more thing, Amy said hesitantly. I've been monitoring Krath communications. They're calling what happened at Velar Prime a disaster. Their military command is in chaos. Some of their conquered worlds are rebelling, thinking the Krath aren't as invincible as they claimed. That was interesting. Jake had hoped their victory would have ripple effects, but he hadn't expected things to move this quickly. Keep monitoring their channels. If those rebellions succeed, it could reshape this entire region of space. After Amy left, Jake stood at the window of his quarters, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, civilizations were changing, alliances were forming, and the balance of power was shifting, all because humanity had decided to answer a distress call. He thought about the 16 species that had ignored the Valari's plea for help. They had made the safe choice the practical choice. They had protected their own interests and avoided making enemies, and they had been willing to let 6 billion innocent beings die for that safety. Humanity had made a different choice. They had risked their newest and most powerful ships, sent thousands of crew members into danger, and challenged an empire that had been conquering worlds for decades. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was completely human. 3 days from Earth, the Titan's sensors detected an approaching fleet. Jake was immediately on the bridge, alert for potential threats, but Lieutenant Ryan Cole quickly identified the ships. "It's an Earth Defense Fleet honor guard, sir," Ryan reported. 20 ships led by the battlecruiser Atlas. They're here to escort us home." Jake felt a surge of emotion. An honor guard. Earth was welcoming them home as heroes. Open a channel to the Atlas. The face that appeared on the screen was familiar. Captain Daniel Price, Helen's older brother, commanded the Atlas. He was grinning widely. "Commander Morrison, on behalf of the Earth Defense Fleet and the United Earth Council, I'm here to escort the first Dreadnought Armada home. Congratulations on your victory. The whole system is waiting to welcome you." "Thank you, Captain," Jake replied. "We're glad to be coming home." The combined fleet traveled the final distance to Earth together. As they approached the solar system, Jake saw that it wasn't just military vessels waiting for them. Hundreds of civilian ships had gathered, from small personal craft to large colony transports. News feeds were broadcasting live coverage of their return. When the Titan entered Earth's orbit, Jake was overwhelmed by what he saw. The orbital stations were decorated with lights. Ships flashed their running lights in salute. And on the planet below, entire cities had illuminated their buildings to spell out messages of welcome. Admiral Stone contacted him directly. "Commander Morrison, when you're ready, shuttle down to Geneva. The Council wants to honor you and your crew in person." "We'll be ready in 2 hours, Admiral," Jake said. He gathered his senior staff for the trip down: Helen Price, Amy Burke, Ryan Cole, Paul Sanders, and Dr. Karen White. These were the people who had stood with him through the darkest moments of the battle. They deserved to share in whatever recognition was coming. The shuttle descent was smooth. As they broke through the clouds over Geneva, Jake could see massive crowds gathered around the council building. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people, all waiting to catch a glimpse of the returning heroes. When they landed and emerged from the shuttle, the roar of the crowd was deafening. People were cheering, waving flags, holding up signs thanking them for what they had done. Jake felt uncomfortable with the attention, but he forced himself to smile and wave. Inside the council chamber, the leaders of United Earth waited. President Marcus Hall stood at the podium, and when Jake and his officers entered, everyone in the room stood and applauded. The ovation went on for several minutes. Finally, President Hall raised his hand for silence. "Commander Jake Morrison, Captain Lisa Grant, and all the brave men and women of the first Dreadnought Armada, you have done something extraordinary. You have shown the galaxy what humanity stands for. You have saved an entire civilization from extinction, and you have changed Earth's place among the stars forever." He paused, letting his words sink in. "For your courage, your sacrifice, and your unwavering commitment to doing what is right. The United Earth Council awards you and every member of your crews the Star of Valor. You are heroes, not just to Earth, but to all free beings in the galaxy." The ceremony continued for another hour. Each officer received their medal personally from the president. Jake watched as Amy Burke, barely able to contain her emotions, accepted hers. Paul Sanders looked embarrassed but proud. Helen Price stood at attention, every inch a military officer. When it was Jake's turn, President Hall looked him directly in the eyes. "You were faced with an impossible choice, Commander. Save strangers or protect your own. You chose to save the strangers. That choice defines who we are as a species." Jake accepted the medal, feeling its weight in his hand. "We just did what anyone should do, sir. We helped people who needed help." "That's exactly why you're a hero," Hall replied. "Because you think it's just what anyone should do." After the ceremony, there was a reception. Jake found himself surrounded by diplomats, military officers, and politicians, all wanting to shake his hand and ask about the battle. He answered their questions patiently, though all he really wanted was to find a quiet corner and rest. Admiral Stone rescued him eventually, pulling him aside to a private balcony overlooking the city. "You look exhausted, Commander." "I am," Jake admitted. "But I'll manage." "You've earned a rest," Stone said. "The Titan is going into dry dock for 3 months of repairs. I'm giving you and your crew extended leave. Take time to recover, both physically and mentally. What happens after that? Jake asked. What happens to the Armada? Stone looked out at the city lights. The galaxy is changing, Jake. Word of what you did is spreading. Some species want to ally with us. Others are afraid of us now. The Krath are weakened but not destroyed. We're going to need the Armada, and we're going to need commanders like you. You think there will be more fights? I think there will be more calls for help, Stone said carefully. And I think Earth will continue to answer them. We've set a precedent. We can't ignore distress calls now without seeming like hypocrites. Jake understood what she was saying. The battle at Velar Prime hadn't just been a one-time event. It had committed humanity to a larger role in galactic affairs. They were protectors now, whether they wanted to be or not. I'll be ready when you need me, Jake said. I know you will, Stone replied. But for now, go home. See your family. Rest. You've earned it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of interviews, ceremonies, and meetings. Jake found himself becoming a public figure, recognized everywhere he went. People wanted to hear about the battle, about the Volari, about what it was like to face down an entire enemy fleet. He visited the families of those who had died, attending memorials and funerals. It was the hardest part of coming home, seeing the faces of children who would grow up without their parents, of spouses who would face the future alone. But he owed them that much, to look them in the eye and tell them their loved ones had died as heroes. 2 months after returning to Earth, Jake received a message from Elder Soren. The Volari leader wanted to update him on the reconstruction efforts. Jake took the call in his apartment away from cameras and crowds. Soren's face appeared on the screen, and Jake was pleased to see that the alien looked healthier than he had on Velar Prime. Commander Morrison, I hope this message finds you well. I'm doing fine, Elder, Jake replied. How are your people? We are healing, Soren said. Slowly, but we are healing. The human aid ships have been invaluable. Your engineers are helping us rebuild our cities. Your doctors are treating our wounded. Every day we are reminded of the debt we owe your species. You don't owe us anything, Jake said. We helped because it was the right thing to do. That is why we owe you everything, Soren replied with a smile. But I did not contact you just to express gratitude.